No, I think they're acutely aware. And the American public is very attuned to energy prices, as we all know. This is just after gas. So it's absolutely going to be a topic of conversation, floor speeches. I think Democrats are tweeting about it constantly. Republicans are trying to talk about how there's a boom in AI, and that's what's going to generate a lot of economic growth. But the reality is that electricity prices are through the roof. So anybody made that trade has been doing really well.
Henrietta, Tom and I were talking about we've got 22 days till this potential shutdown, and I gather there are two routes that the Congress could take here. And I know the appropriators, Susan Collins and Tom Cole, they're interested in kind of a short-term spending bill. There's an appetite among some members, and I think from the president himself for a longer-term bill that would take us to next year. What's your sense of the trajectory here, the way this is going to play out? Yes, over the next couple of weeks here, bearing in mind we've got a recess baked in there as well. But also beyond that, sort of what kind of spending bill we're likely to get if, in fact, we get one?
You know, it's going to take even more money this cycle to keep the government open. And that's something that Republicans generally don't want to talk about after, especially DOGE and the president's efforts to cut the fat on federal spending. The reality is the president has requested more money for the Department of Defense than ever before. We're going to be spending about $2 trillion just to keep the lights on. So there is a reaction function in Congress where instead of passing a big $2 trillion package just to keep the lights on, they end up splicing it into little pieces. And so that's probably what we're going to get going into the last couple months of this year. You'll get a short-term stopgap CR that lasts as few as like 3 weeks, sometimes they do, or into mid-December just before Christmas. And the benefit of that for the minority party is to basically chop up the legislative momentum that the majority party might get. So you see this when either side is in control. You get a short-term stopgap CR that pushes you into Veterans Day and then Christmas, and you just do that over and over again. And you can tell that that's the strategy because the far right now is asking for a full year CR, which is historically anathema to them.
We interrupt our regular program here. Henrietta Treyz, Veda Partners, with us. Joe's out with John Lemire right now. Morning Joe's out with Jonathan Lemire that Howard did renew. Yeah. Variety says he did renew. It was an Andy Cohen gag.
It was a gag.
The great music and the Neumann mics of Howard Stern will continue.
It seems.
On Sirius XM.
We await confirmation in the press release, but looks like that's the
David
case.
David Gura continues with Henrietta Treyz.
Henrietta, I read the Ezra Klein essay in the New York Times over the weekend. He's done a audio component of that as well. But he talks a lot about the bargain that Chuck Schumer made back in March. He convinced members of his caucus to go along with the last spending bill. Ezra Klein, a longtime kind of progressive writer, opinion columnist, saying that he supported that at the time. He understood why the minority leader was doing that at the time. But he said this time is different. And I wonder if you agree with that assessment, how much of a fissure you see within Democrats and how that's kind of compounding the risk or the odds that we're likely to see a shutdown this time around, that the Democrats simply didn't get enough out of going along with that spending bill last time.
Yeah, I think Klein's argument is really interesting. The one thing I agree with is that Democrats need to get their act together. I mean, they don't have a comprehensive message or a strategy. And frankly, I don't think shutting it down just to stymie Trump's forward march is necessarily a cohesive argument. You're going to have to put a lot more meat on the bones. I'm biased, obviously, because I cover macroeconomic policy, but talk about fiscal dominance and trying to stress test the Fed into, cutting interest rates. Talk about how you're about to take over the Supreme Court and force a ruling that allows the president to tax the American people. That's literally what we fought the British over. So I think there are really clear arguments, and Klein's saying shut it down, and we can do better than that.
Henrietta, one quick question here, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as we stagger to the election. Over a beverage this weekend, I was pontificating about the Virginia governor race. Earl Sears, a Republican, against Abby Spanberger, the Democrat out there. How's the Democrat doing there? Is Abigail Spanberger a new Democrat, as David Gura talks about?
Yeah, I think Virginia is a perfect example of where the federal spending cuts come in, whether you get an engaged population, whether or not Democrats turn out, that's what they need to drive. So as long as you're having that conversation, Democrats should, just by being in the minority when one party has control, they should pick up the House and make a real dent in some of the Senate seats, picking up North Carolina and some of the others. Make a real run at it in Joni Ernst's seats. There's a lot to do, especially in an out year and a midterm election cycle.